In today's video, I'm going to tell you how I lost $30,000 on my first trip to Brazil. Don't leave this video because the ending will surprise you. Like this video and leave your comment if you've also fallen for any scam in Brazil. My name is Miguel, I'm 30 years old, and this is the hardest story I've ever had to tell in my life. If you're planning to travel to Brazil or anywhere in the world, you need to watch this video until the end. Because what happened to me can happen to anyone. Don't leave this video because I'm going to give you an incredible tip so you don't fall for any scam in Brazil. It was December 2023. I had just turned 30 and was in a really good phase of my life. I work as a software engineer at an American company, had gotten a recent promotion, and decided to treat myself to a solo trip to Brazil. I always had a fascination with Brazilian culture, the music, the famous beaches, and Rio de Janeiro was at the top of my dream list. I planned everything very carefully. I researched the best neighborhoods, read dozens of travel blogs, watched YouTube videos about safety tips. I thought I was prepared for everything. I booked a hotel in Copacabana, very close to the beach, and set aside a generous amount for the trip. $30,000 that represented my savings from the last 2 years. The flight from Miami to Rio lasted almost 9 hours. I remember looking out the window when we were arriving and seeing that incredible city spreading between mountains and ocean. Christ the Redeemer was there, majestic, and I felt genuine emotion. It was my first big travel dream coming true. I landed at Tom Jobim International Airport on a Tuesday morning. The humid heat hit me as soon as I left the airport, but it was a nice heat, different from the cold I had left in the United States. I took an official airport taxi, one of the safety tips I had noted down, and during the trip to Copacabana, I was impressed by the city's energy. Check this out, for you who are planning to travel to Brazil and don't want to fall for any scam. I developed an ebook called Brazil Unlocked that brings together all the main scams applied against tourists in Brazil and detailed strategies on how to avoid them. The link is in the video description and in the first pinned comment. Download it now and protect yourself. The driver, a nice gentleman named João, told me stories about Rio while driving. He talked about tourist spots, about carnival, about the beaches. "You came at the right time," he said. "December is beautiful here, but watch out for scammers on the beach and in bars. They love tourists." At the time, I thought he was exaggerating, that I was too smart to fall for any scam. My hotel was well located, 2 blocks from Copacabana Beach. The room was simple but comfortable, with a partial view of the sea. After settling in and taking a shower, I put on shorts, a t-shirt, and went out to explore the famous Copacabana sidewalk. It was noon and the sun was strong, but I was too euphoric to care. I walked along the beach, watching the street vendors, people playing beach volleyball, families enjoying the day. I bought coconut water from a vendor and sat on the sand for a while, just absorbing that moment. I was living a dream. In the first 3 days, I strictly followed all the safety tips I had researched. I didn't wear flashy jewelry, only carried the money I needed for the day, kept important documents in the hotel safe. I visited Sugarloaf Mountain, Christ the Redeemer, walked through Lapa, tried typical foods. Each day was better than the last. I met some Brazilians during those first days. People's hospitality impressed me. At a restaurant in Ipanema, I met a group of local friends who invited me to experience Rio's nightlife. We went to some bars in Santa Teresa, and they taught me about caipirinha, samba, and told me stories about their lives in Rio. "Miguel," said one of them, named Carlos, "you're very naive, man. Here in Rio you need to be smarter. There are a lot of hustlers around." He said this laughing, as if it were a joke, but there was a serious tone in his voice, especially with very beautiful women who suddenly approach gringos. "Be suspicious, bro." I laughed along, thinking he was being too paranoid. After all, I was a smart guy. I was 30 years old. I wasn't some inexperienced teenager. How could I fall for some obvious scam? This excessive confidence was my first mistake. On Thursday of my first week, I decided to explore Copacabana's nightlife alone. Carlos and the other friends I had met were busy, and I wanted to have a more authentic, more spontaneous experience. I had dinner at a restaurant near the hotel, had a few beers, and around 10 at night, I started walking along Atlantic Avenue. The night was perfect. Sea breeze, pleasant temperature, movement in the streets. I stopped at some bars, talked to other tourists. I was feeling confident and relaxed. It was exactly the kind of experience I was looking for. Getting to know a city for real, without tourist routes. Around 11:30 at night, I was sitting at the counter of a bar near the beach, having my third beer and watching the street movement, when she appeared. Ana. That was the name she told me. An incredibly beautiful Brazilian woman, around 25 years old, long brown hair, charming smile, elegant blue dress that highlighted her eyes. She approached the counter and ordered a caipirinha. When the bartender brought the drink, she turned to me and said in English with a Brazilian accent, "You're American, right? I can tell by the way you're dressed." We started talking, and I discovered that she spoke English very well, said she had a degree in tourism and worked showing the city to foreign visitors. "Miguel, what a beautiful name," she said when I introduced myself. "Are you enjoying Rio?" She asked, genuinely interested in knowing about my experience in the city. I told her about the places I had visited, about how impressed I was with people's hospitality, and she seemed really interested in every word. Ana told me that she had grown up in Rio, that she knew every corner of the city, the places that tourists never discover. "There's an incredible bar nearby," she said, after we had been talking for about an hour. "It's frequented more by locals, has live music tonight, really nice atmosphere. Would you like to check it out?" Looking back now, I see all the signs I should have noticed. A beautiful woman approaching a tourist alone in a bar, the conversation that flowed too perfectly, the invitation to go somewhere else. But at that moment, I was enchanted. Ana was intelligent, funny, seemed genuinely interested in showing me the real Rio. "Sure," I replied without hesitation. "I'd love to get to know a more authentic place." I paid for our drinks. She had insisted on paying for hers, which made me trust her even more, and we went out to the street together. The bar was only 3 blocks away, she said. A pleasant walk. During the journey, Ana continued telling stories about the city, pointing out historic buildings, talking about Rio culture. It was like having a private guide, and I felt lucky to have found someone so special on my trip. "You're lucky," she said, laughing. "I don't usually go out with tourists, but you seem different." The bar was smaller than the previous one, more intimate, with typical Brazilian decoration and a band playing samba in the background. Ana knew the bartender, who greeted her familiarly. "2 special caipirinhas for the couple," he said, winking. I laughed, feeling part of that welcoming environment. We sat at a table in the corner, more private, where we could talk better above the music. The caipirinhas arrived quickly. They were different from the ones I had tried before, sweeter, with a flavor I couldn't completely identify. "This is the house's special recipe," Ana explained. "They use artisanal cachaça and tropical fruits." The drink was really delicious. I drank the first one pretty quickly, and Ana ordered another round. The conversation flowed perfectly. She asked me questions about my life in the United States, my work, my family. She seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me better. "You're very different from other Americans I know," she said. "More sensitive, more interested in culture." I vaguely remember having the second caipirinha, then maybe a third. Ana kept talking, laughing, occasionally touching my arm affectionately. The music seemed to be getting louder, or maybe my hearing was getting more sensitive. I started feeling more relaxed than normal, a sense of well-being that went beyond the normal effect of alcohol. "Are you okay?" Ana asked at one point, with a worried expression on her face. "You look a little tired." I said I was feeling great, just relaxed, enjoying the night and her company. But internally, a small part of my mind began to notice that something was different. The next memories are fragmented, like flashes from a camera with low battery. I remember Ana helping me leave the bar, her arm around my waist, supporting me. "Let's take you back to the hotel," I heard her say. "You drank a little too much." Her voice seemed to come from far away, as if I were hearing through a tunnel. I vaguely remember being in a car. Not a regular taxi, but a private car. There were other people, voices I didn't recognize, talking in Portuguese in low tones. I tried to pay attention to what they were saying, but the words mixed in my mind like water mixing with oil. The last thing I clearly remember is being in my hotel elevator. Ana was with me, still supporting me, talking to someone on the phone. "We're almost there," I heard her say. Everything is going according to plan. At that moment, a part of my consciousness tried to understand what she meant by according to plan, but my brain was working in slow motion. After that, total darkness. I didn't dream, I didn't have nightmares, I simply ceased to exist for 12 complete hours. It was as if someone had turned off a switch in my mind, and I had been completely erased from reality. If you've ever been through any situation of insecurity or scams during travels, leave a comment sharing your experience. Your story can help other people prevent themselves. And if you're enjoying the video, leave your like to help me. I woke up on Friday at 2 in the afternoon. The first sensation was intense thirst, as if I hadn't drunk water for days. My head was throbbing with a pain I had never experienced before. It wasn't a common hangover. It was something much more intense and disorienting. My mouth was dry as cotton, and when I tried to get up from bed, the room spun around me. It took me a few minutes to be able to focus my vision and remember where I was. Hotel room in Copacabana, Rio de Janeiro. But something was wrong. I was wearing only underwear and a t-shirt, but I didn't remember taking off my clothes. My pants, shoes, and wallet were thrown on the floor carelessly, as if someone had undressed me in a hurry. My first concern was finding my wallet. When I picked it up from the floor, my heart started racing. It was completely empty. There wasn't even my American ID. I ran to the hotel safe where I kept my important documents and extra money. I typed the password with trembling hands. The safe was empty. It was at that moment that reality began to hit me like a giant wave. I grabbed my phone to check banking notifications, 17 transaction alerts, ATM withdrawals, $3,000, $2,500, $4,000. Purchases at establishments I had never visited, $8,000, $5,500. Online transfers I had never authorized, $6,000, $3,000. When I finished adding up all the amounts, the total was exactly $32,000. Practically all my savings that I had brought for the trip, including the credit card limits that had been used to the maximum. I felt like the ground had disappeared from under my feet. Memories from the previous night began to come back in fragments. Anna, the bar, the drinks with strange taste, the growing feeling of dizziness, the car with unknown people. Everything made sense in a horrible and scary way. I had fallen for the Goodnight Cinderella scam, exactly what Carlos had warned me about. I tried calling the bank immediately, but it was Friday afternoon in Brazil, which meant it was about 11 in the morning in the United States. I managed to speak with customer service, desperately explained that I had been the victim of a scam, that someone had used my cards without my authorization. The attendant was nice, but informed me that it would be necessary to open an investigation process that could take weeks or even months. "Mr. Miguel," said the attendant, "I'm going to block all your cards immediately, but I need to inform you that the transactions were made with your physical card and your personal passwords. This greatly complicates the reimbursement process." When I heard this, I felt an emptiness in my stomach. How did they get my passwords? Then I remembered. The night before, when I was talking to Anna at the first bar, she had asked about my date of birth, about numbers that were important to me. She said she was trying to understand Americans' personality through their superstitions with numbers. Naively, I told her about using my date of birth as a password, about how I chose numbers based on important dates. She had collected this information so naturally, so casually, that I didn't realize I was being manipulated. There were probably people watching our conversation, mentally noting every piece of information I revealed about my personal and financial life. Getting dressed and leaving the hotel was one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life. Each step seemed to weigh tons. People passed by me on the street normally, enjoying another beautiful day in Rio, while my world had completely collapsed. I went to the nearest police station to file a police report. The police station was an old building, with noisy air conditioning and huge lines. I waited almost 3 hours to be seen by a detective who, although polite, made it clear that cases like mine were extremely common. "Mr. Miguel," he said while typing my statement. "Unfortunately, we receive similar cases almost daily. The Goodnight Cinderella scam is very sophisticated here in Rio. They usually work in organized groups," the detective explained. "The woman who approached you is just the bait. There are other people involved, who prepares the drinks with the substances, who is responsible for transporting the victim, who has the equipment to clone cards and make transactions. It's a very well-planned scheme. I asked about the chances of recovering my money, or finding those responsible. The detective was honest with me. The chances are very small, sir. These groups know exactly how to operate to make investigations difficult. They probably used fake documents, have planned escape routes, and quickly distribute the stolen money. I left the police station feeling even worse than when I had arrived. Not only had I lost my money, but I also discovered that I was part of a statistic, that I was just another victim in a scheme that had been working perfectly for years. The feeling of helplessness was devastating. I went back to the hotel and locked myself in the room. I called my parents in the United States and had to explain what had happened. My mother cried on the phone, my father was angry, but mainly worried about my safety. "The important thing is that you're okay," said my mother. "We can recover money, but if something worse had happened to you..." This conversation made me realize a dimension of the scam that I hadn't considered. I could have been kidnapped, physically hurt, or worse. The fact that I woke up only without money, but physically intact in my own hotel room, was actually luck within bad luck. I spent the rest of Friday and all of Saturday in the room, trying to process what had happened. I couldn't eat properly, couldn't sleep. Every noise in the hallway made me jump. Paranoia had completely taken over me. Anyone who looked in my direction on the street seemed suspicious to me. On Sunday, I forced myself to leave the hotel to resolve practical matters. I needed money to pay the remaining expenses and buy a ticket back home. I called my father and asked for financial help, one of the most humiliating conversations of my adult life. At 30 years old, having to ask my parents for borrowed money for falling for a scam made me feel like a complete failure. During these difficult days, something interesting happened. Some Brazilians I met during the trip, including Carlos, found out what had happened to me and came to visit me at the hotel. "Man, I'm so sorry," said Carlos, genuinely worried. "I warned you, but I didn't think it would happen so fast." "Miguel, you weren't the first, and unfortunately won't be the last," said another person from the group. "These scammers are professionals. They know exactly how to identify vulnerable tourists, how to gain trust, how to apply the scam without leaving traces. Don't blame yourself so much for falling for this." These conversations helped me understand that it hadn't been simply naivety on my part. I had been targeted by experienced criminals who study human behavior, who know exactly which weak points to exploit. Anna hadn't chosen me randomly. She probably observed me for days before making the approach. Still, the feeling of being deceived so completely continued to eat away at me inside. How didn't I notice the signs? How did I allow an apparently innocent conversation to lead me to such a dangerous situation? These questions hammered in my head constantly. On Monday, my last Monday in Rio, I decided to do something productive with my traumatic experience. I started researching extensively about the Goodnight Cinderella scam and discovered information that shocked me. It wasn't just a common scam. It was a sophisticated criminal industry that moved millions of dollars annually just in Rio de Janeiro. I discovered that the substances used weren't just common sedatives. They were specific combinations of drugs that cause temporary amnesia, muscle relaxation, and disinhibition, but keep the victim conscious enough to provide passwords and information when requested. It was cruel and precise science. The research also revealed that I had been lucky in some aspects. Many victims of the Goodnight Cinderella scam end up in much worse situations. They are taken to unknown locations, suffer physical abuse, or wake up in even more dangerous situations. The fact that I woke up in my own hotel room, even without money, indicated that the scammers were professionals who preferred to keep a low profile. But before continuing my story, for you who are planning to travel to Brazil and don't want to fall for any scam, I developed an ebook, Brazil Unlocked, that brings together all the main scams applied against tourists in Brazil and detailed strategies on how to avoid them. The link is in the video description and in the first pinned comment. Download it now and protect yourself. On Tuesday, the day of my return flight, I woke up with a mixture of relief and sadness. Relief for leaving a traumatic situation behind, but sadness for having to leave Brazil with this horrible experience as my last memory. I packed quickly, wanting to leave the hotel as soon as possible. In the taxi to the airport, the same driver João who had brought me from the airport a week before recognized me. "Hey Miguel, how was your week in Rio?" he asked animatedly. When I briefly told him what had happened, his expression changed completely. "My God, man, I'm so sorry. That's terrible." "You know, Miguel," said João during the trip, "I've been working for 15 years taking tourists in this taxi. I've seen a lot of things. This scam that happened to you is really common, but most people don't tell anyone out of shame. You were brave to file the report." João then told me some stories of other tourists who had gone through similar situations. A German who lost 50,000 euros. A French family who had all their cards cloned. An English couple who lost not only money, but also passports and important documents. Knowing that I wasn't alone in this experience was, strangely, a small comfort. The flight back to Miami was completely different from the arrival. This time there was no expectation or euphoria, just an immense desire to get home and try to rebuild my life. During the 9-hour flight, I had time to reflect on everything that had happened and begin to process the lessons I could take from this terrible experience. Arriving home was bittersweet. My apartment was exactly as I had left it, but I was a completely different person from the one who had left a week before. I had not only lost my money, but also a part of my confidence in the world and in people. The following weeks were dedicated to trying to solve financial problems. The bank started the investigation process, but they had already warned me that the chances of reimbursement were minimal. I had to ask for loans to cover expenses that I had planned to pay with the lost savings. My financial planning for the next 2 years was completely ruined. But perhaps the deepest impact wasn't financial, but psychological. I developed paranoia regarding strangers who approached me in any situation. I stopped going out to bars alone, avoided casual conversations with people I didn't know, and constantly questioned the motivations of people who showed interest in getting to know me. It was necessary to do therapy to start processing the trauma and develop strategies to trust people again and my own judgment capacity. The therapist explained to me that being a victim of a sophisticated scam wasn't indicative of stupidity or excessive naivety, but rather the result of psychological techniques very well developed by criminals. "Miguel," said my therapist during one of the sessions, "you were a victim of criminal social engineering. These people study human behavior specifically to exploit our natural tendencies of trust and socialization. Don't blame yourself for characteristics that, in normal circumstances, are positive." Slowly, I began to understand that my experience, although traumatic, could be useful to other people. I decided to share my story not only as a form of personal therapy, but as an alert for other travelers who could be vulnerable to the same scams. I researched extensively about scams against tourists, not only in Brazil, but worldwide. I discovered patterns, common techniques, warning signs that could help other people protect themselves. I transformed my traumatic experience into practical knowledge that could save other people from going through what I went through. Some of the most important lessons I learned. First, criminals who apply scams are extremely competent professionals. They are not amateur opportunists, but people who dedicate time and energy to study their victims and perfect their techniques. Underestimating this competence is the first mistake. Second, very casual approaches from strangers in tourist environments should always be viewed with suspicion, especially when they come accompanied by invitations to change location. No matter how natural the conversation seems, environmental changes exponentially increase risks for tourists. Third, never, under any circumstances, reveal personal information like important dates, lucky numbers, or anything that could be used as a password during casual conversations with strangers. Scammers are masters at making these questions seem like a natural part of a friendly conversation. Fourth, drinks with unusual flavors, or very different from normal, should be avoided, especially when offered by people you just met. If something tastes strange, stop drinking immediately and leave the place. Fifth, always inform someone you trust about your plans when going out alone in an unknown city. Have a regular check-in system with friends or family, especially during nighttime activities. Sixth, always keep an emergency reserve of money and documents in a separate and secure location. Never put all your eggs in the same basket, even if the hotel's safe seems secure. Seventh, trust your instincts. If any situation seems too good to be true, or if you feel any discomfort, leave immediately. It's better to seem rude and be safe than to be polite and become a victim. 8th, research specifically about common scams in the destination you're visiting before traveling. Each region has its criminal specialties, and prior knowledge can save your life and your money. Today, 2 years after that fateful December in Rio de Janeiro, I can say that I managed to rebuild my financial and emotional life. The lost money was recovered with a lot of work and savings, and therapy helped me overcome the excessive paranoia I had developed. More importantly, I managed to transform a traumatic experience into something useful for other people. I created educational content about travel safety, helped other tourists who went through similar situations, and developed safety protocols that have been helping people avoid the same mistakes I made.